There is a moment, quiet, imperceptible, when you catch your own reflection and feel something ancient stir beneath your skin. Not pride, not vanity, something darker, a flicker of resentment, envy, rage, or shame. Emotions that you quickly suppress, as though pushing a wild animal back into its cage. And in that instant, you realize there is another you hidden beneath the self you display to the world. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the side of the psyche that we refuse to acknowledge, the chaos buried under the illusion of control. It is everything you deny, everything you reject, everything you cannot bear to face. But the frightening truth is this: what you repress does not disappear. It festers. It waits. Imagine walking through an old house in the dead of night. Every room seems familiar except one. Its door has been sealed for as long as you can remember. You pass by it every day, pretending it isn't there, pretending it holds nothing of importance. But some nights, when the wind moans through the corridors of your mind, you swear you hear something on the other side breathing. That door is your shadow, and every time you ignore it, the knocking grows louder. We spend our lives curating the light, the parts of ourselves that are admirable, rational, acceptable. We smile, succeed, perform, and pretend that the rest doesn't exist. Yet, as Jung warned, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The irony is cruel. What you hide from most fervently is what most desires to make you whole. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your mirror, reflecting everything you have abandoned in yourself to survive in the world. Think of the anger you repress when you're humiliated, the jealousy you disguise as disinterest, the lust you bury under moral restraint, the superiority you camouflage with false humility. Each of these disowned emotions does not vanish. It retreats into the depths, gathering power. And when the shadow grows strong enough, it takes control. It slips through cracks in your persona, in moments of rage, in cruel words spoken by accident, in irrational fears and obsessions. You see it in the friend who despises arrogance but cannot stop talking about their own humility, in the parent who condemns rebellion but secretly yearns for freedom, in yourself, perhaps, when you condemn what you most secretly desire. We project our shadow onto others because it is easier to fight a demon outside than to meet one within. We call others evil, stupid, weak, corrupt, never realizing that these are fragments of our own rejected nature, thrown into the faces of strangers to keep our illusions intact. But repression has a cost. Every unacknowledged desire, every unspoken anger, every silenced truth becomes part of a psychic debt, a weight you carry invisibly. The more you deny it, the heavier it becomes. To confront your shadow is to risk disintegration. You must look at the parts of yourself that disgust you, not to destroy them, but to understand them. You must peel away every mask until you stand before the primal self, the raw, unfiltered creature that feels everything you've tried to forget. It is a terrifying descent, because in that darkness, there are no justifications, no moral excuses. There is only what is. And yet, Jung's greatest insight was not that we have a shadow, but that integration is possible. That light is not the absence of darkness, but its reconciliation. The door, after all, was never locked from the outside. It is your hand that must turn the handle. From the moment we step into the world, we begin to wear masks. Not out of deceit, but necessity. The child who cries too loudly learns to soften their voice. The dreamer who's mocked learns to stay silent. The one who was hurt learns to smile so no one sees the wound. And over the years, those masks fuse to our faces until we forget there was ever anything underneath. Jung called this mask the persona, the social self, the carefully constructed image we present to the world to earn love, approval, belonging. But beneath that image, the shadow waits, muttering softly in the dark. The persona keeps us safe. It allows us to function, to fit in. Yet, in protecting us from rejection, it also imprisons us. For the more convincing the mask becomes, the more alien the self beneath it feels. We begin to mistake performance for authenticity, and in doing so, we lose the ability to tell where the role ends and the soul begins. The shadow, starved of light, grows resentful. It begins to rebel in strange, unexpected ways. You may wake one day to find yourself exhausted by the very life you built. The job, the relationships, the identity that once defined you now feel hollow, absurd. You feel restless, irritated, ungrateful, as though something inside you has turned against you. That is the shadow's rebellion. The more you suppress it, the more it will sabotage your peace. It whispers in your insecurities, feeds your compulsions, poisons your self-image. It will make you lash out at those you love, envy those who reflect what you've denied, and despise the very parts of yourself that cry out for recognition. The shadow has only one demand: to be seen. But we are terrified of it because we believe it to be evil. We think of the shadow as violence, greed, lust, jealousy, the monstrous side of human nature. And yes, those elements dwell within it. But so do our rejected strengths. Assertiveness, power, creativity, sensuality, ambition. We banish them too, fearing they'll make us unlovable, arrogant, or dangerous. We mistake intensity for sin and vulnerability for weakness. So we cut away what makes us whole and call the mutilation virtue. This inner division becomes a battlefield. One side seeks order, the other chaos. One wants to maintain appearances, the other to shatter them. You feel the war in moments of self-betrayal, when you say yes but mean no, when you smile while seething, when you claim indifference to what secretly matters most. Friedrich Nietzsche once warned, "Be careful when you fight the monsters, lest you become one." But what if the monster you're fighting is already part of you? What if the very thing you fear is the source of your vitality? We like to imagine that goodness means purity, a sterile kind of light untouched by darkness. But light without shadow is blindness. Purity without conflict is deadness. True integrity, Jung believed, comes not from denying our contradictions, but from containing them, from holding the angel and the beast in the same heart. When we pretend to be all light, the darkness grows stronger. When we integrate the darkness, the light deepens. So ask yourself, who is it that you are pretending to be? And what have you buried to maintain that illusion? Perhaps your anger is not hatred, but a cry for boundaries. Perhaps your envy is not malice, but a recognition of unlived potential. Perhaps your fear is not cowardice, but an invitation to courage. The shadow speaks in distortions, not lies, but twisted truths. To listen to it is to risk unraveling your comfortable identity. But to ignore it is to become a stranger to your own soul. Because every time you silence that voice, it grows a little louder. Every time you deny it, it slips further into control. And sooner or later, you will look at the life you've constructed, the pristine mask you've polished for years, and realize it no longer fits. That is the moment the shadow steps forward. Not to destroy you, but to demand a reckoning. There comes a point when avoidance becomes unbearable. When the life you've crafted with such precision begins to feel like a performance you can no longer sustain. The laughter sounds forced, the ambitions hollow, the relationships scripted. Something ancient and unnamed begins to stir beneath the facade, and you realize you are being summoned. This is the beginning of descent. It does not happen in one moment of crisis, but through countless subtle fractures. Sleepless nights, inexplicable sadness, sudden bursts of anger or longing. You feel the walls of your identity crumble, and you cling to them, terrified. But the more you resist, the deeper you sink. Jung called this the night sea journey, the archetypal plunge into the underworld of the psyche. It is the myth of every soul that must die to who it was in order to become what it is meant to be. Like Orpheus descending into Hades, or Dante wandering through hell, you enter the depths not to escape life, but to reclaim it. The shadow meets you there. It does not greet you kindly. It shows you what you've become, the manipulations you rationalized, the loves you corrupted, the truths you abandoned. It strips away your justifications until all that remains is the raw, unfiltered you. At first, it feels like annihilation. The self you've defended begins to dissolve, and you feel lost in the chaos. Depression, anxiety, disillusionment. These are not mere symptoms of failure, but signs of transformation. They are the body's protest against falsehood. You begin to see that your shadow was never trying to destroy you, It was trying to save you from the prison of the persona. But salvation through the shadow requires sacrifice. You must surrender control, let yourself unravel, and face the archetypes that haunt your unconscious. The inner tyrant, the wounded child, the seducer, the victim, the betrayer. Each is a mask worn by a truth you've avoided. You meet the tyrant when you realize how much you crave control, not out of strength but fear. You meet the wounded child when you face the grief you never allowed yourself to feel. You meet the seducer when you see how deeply you yearn for validation. You meet the betrayer when you acknowledge the ways you've abandoned yourself. These encounters are brutal because they reveal the smallness of the self you thought you knew. You are forced to witness your own contradictions. Love tainted by selfishness, virtue corrupted by pride, compassion mingled with contempt. And yet, within that darkness lies a strange kind of light. No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Jung wrote, "To integrate the shadow is not to escape evil, but to redeem it, to transform instinct into insight, rage into clarity, fear into humility." This is psychological alchemy, the art of turning lead into gold, chaos into consciousness. It is in this crucible that real individuality is born. The false self dies, and something ancient, something vast, begins to emerge. You begin to act differently, not perfectly but authentically. You stop pretending to be virtuous and instead strive to be whole. You stop seeking approval and start seeking truth. You stop fearing your darkness because you've learned to speak its language. The descent reveals that the shadow was never your enemy. It was your guide, the part of you that remembered what your surface self forgot. That life is not about purity, but totality. When you return from the abyss, you do not come back unscarred. The innocence is gone, replaced by something far more powerful, awareness. You carry the knowledge that the same energy that destroys can also create, that within every act of cruelty lies the seed of compassion, that even the darkest impulses can be transmuted into wisdom. But the work does not end in the depths. The real test begins when you return to the light, when you must live in the world again, not as who you were, but as who you've become. The question then is not how to escape your shadow, but how to dance with it. To integrate the shadow is not to conquer it. It is to court it, to learn its rhythm, to invite it to speak in its own voice without letting it consume the stage. Integration is a sacred union, a reconciliation of opposites. Light without darkness blinds. Darkness without light devours. Only their marriage can produce depth, the chiaroscuro of the soul. You begin to realize that morality, as society teaches it, is far too shallow. It divides the world into saints and sinners, winners and failures, light and dark. But life itself doesn't respect such boundaries. Creation requires destruction. Rebirth demands death. The stars themselves burn their own fuel to shine. We are taught to aspire to goodness, but not to wholeness. To be good is to perform what others approve of. To be whole is to embrace what life truly is. Radiant and terrible, serene and savage. The shadow, once seen, loses its fangs. You begin to notice its subtle whispers. An intuition, a feeling of tension when you betray yourself, a surge of passion when you live in alignment. You start to recognize that your darkness holds intelligence, a kind of primal wisdom uncorrupted by social pretense. There's a deep humility in this realization. You see that you are neither angel nor demon, but both. And it is from this paradox that compassion arises. For how can you condemn others for their darkness once you've faced your own? How can you pretend to be purely virtuous once you've witnessed the contradictions pulsing in your own heart? The more you integrate your shadow, the less you project it. The world softens. People no longer appear as villains or heroes, but as mirrors. Each reveals something you've yet to accept in yourself. That arrogance you despise may point to your own neglected confidence. That fragility you pity may echo your own tenderness. As the fragments of the psyche begin to speak to each other, you feel a quiet coherence, a subtle harmony within chaos. The impulses that once tore you apart now complement each other. Your anger becomes courage. Your envy becomes aspiration. Your fear becomes awareness. It is an alchemy not of denial, but of transformation. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the process by which the unconscious and conscious parts of the self unite to form a complete human being. It is not self-improvement, but self-realization. The task is not to become better, but to become real. The true sage, the true artist, the true lover, all are born from this synthesis. Their strength does not come from purity, but from depth. They have descended, suffered, and emerged carrying both darkness and light in their hands. As the poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "Perhaps everything terrible is in its deepest being something helpless that wants help from us. This is the secret of the shadow. It is not evil. It is wounded divinity, longing for redemption through awareness. It wants not to destroy you, but to be embraced, not with indulgence, but with understanding. When you learn to hold your own contradictions, when you can stand before your inner chaos and not flinch, something extraordinary happens. You begin to emanate authenticity. People sense it. You become grounded, unpredictable, alive. No longer at war with yourself, your presence becomes a sanctuary for others. This wholeness is not serenity, it is intensity. You feel everything more vividly. Joy, sorrow, passion, loss. But beneath it all runs a quiet current of peace. Not because life is safe, but because you've accepted its totality. And in that acceptance, something sacred is born. You no longer seek to escape the darkness, nor worship the light. You learn to walk the razor's edge between them, where creation happens, where love becomes truth, where the human becomes divine. The shadow is no longer behind you. It walks beside you, whispering, not in threat, but in companionship. There is a strange stillness that follows the storm of the soul, not the silence of defeat, but the quiet of integration. You have faced your shadow, seen the fractures within you, and found something both terrifying and tender in the depths. You are no longer the same. You have lost your innocence, but gained your wholeness. The journey through the shadow does not end in light. It ends in balance. You begin to live differently, not chasing perfection, but presence. Every act, every word, every silence carries the weight of awareness. You are no longer haunted by your contradictions, because you understand they are the raw materials of your being. The light you now carry is not blinding, but compassionate, the kind that illuminates without erasing the dark. You have learned that to truly see others, you must first see yourself. To forgive the cruelty of the world, you must first forgive your own. For most of your life, you were taught to divide, to separate what is good from what is bad, what is acceptable from what is unacceptable. But you now know that life does not obey such neat moral arithmetic. The seed of cruelty can awaken strength. The spark of envy can ignite transformation. The wound of rejection can open the heart to love. To become whole is to live beyond moral categories, not in amorality, but in depth. You are not here to be flawless. You are here to be complete. And completeness is a strange, radiant imperfection. The integrated person walks through the world differently. Their eyes do not seek to judge, but to understand. They are not fooled by the appearances of virtue or vice, because they have seen both living inside themselves. There is a quiet dignity in their presence, the kind that can hold suffering without despair, joy without intoxication, and power without arrogance. They know that light is born from darkness, and darkness is redeemed by light. They know that every soul, no matter how lost, is not broken, only divided. When you reach this understanding, life itself becomes a dialogue between the visible and invisible, between what you do and what you feel, between what you know and what you are still learning to accept. The shadow, once feared, becomes an ally, a guardian of authenticity. Whenever you drift too far into the illusions of ego or conformity, it returns, whispering reminders in the language of discomfort. It unsettles you not to punish, but to awaken. To live without the shadow would be to live without gravity, drifting endlessly, unanchored by reality. The shadow grounds you in your humanity, keeps you humble, keeps you real. It is easy to mistake the integration of the shadow for enlightenment. But enlightenment, in its truest sense, is not a destination. It is the ongoing act of seeing clearly, of walking consciously through both light and dark without turning away from either. As the philosopher Alan Watts once said, "No valid plans for the future can be made by those who have no capacity for living now." And perhaps that is the final lesson of the shadow, that the present moment, with all its contradictions, is enough. To live consciously is to live courageously, to stand before yourself with nothing hidden and say, "Yes, this too is me." The rage and the tenderness, the arrogance and the humility, the longing and the fear, the beauty and the decay, all of it belongs. All of it is sacred. The shadow you once fled becomes the doorway through which you return to life, raw, unmasked, unguarded. You are no longer trying to be pure, nor perfect, nor safe. You are simply awake. And when you stand in that awakened stillness, when you can feel the light and the dark intertwining within you like two currents of the same river, you understand what Jung truly meant, that the goal of life is not to become good, but to become whole. And in that wholeness, you finally meet yourself.